Hi, this video is a discussion and demonstration of this extension that I built for my Selmer Bundy Contra-alto Clarinet. Those of you that have been following me might know that I built extensions for the other contrabasses and contraltos, such as the LeBlanc 342, which I have an extension on right here, and the Vito contrabass clarinet, and also the LeBlanc 352 straight metal contralto clarinet. So the next step was to naturally build an extension for the Bundy Contra-alto, which is arguably one of the more popular options out of the four that I've mentioned so far. So what's new about this extension, besides the fact that it is for a Selmer Bundy Contra-alto Clarinet, is that rather than just going down to a low C, I decided to build this one down to a low B to begin with. And I've already done that with this contrabass clarinet extension, which is keyed down to low B, which would be a sounding A0. I'm not sure how useful that is, and I do plan on making a video about that sometime too. And the written low B natural on the contralto clarinet would be equivalent to a concert D1, which would be the same as the low E natural on contrabass clarinet. So technically, the majority of contrabass clarinet repertoire could be covered by a contralto clarinet extended down to low B natural. But most people would probably just stop at a low C, which most contrabass clarinet repertoire could be covered by too. And these extensions work very similarly, while they actually work the exact same, all of them, in which you have thumb keys, which you have to press, and you have to hold down the low E flat key while playing in order to reach these notes. So fingering a low E flat, and then you add your top key to get a low D. The next one down is a low C sharp, and then a low C, and then the last one is a low B. If you do get a low C one, there won't be a low B option. There will just be 3 keys. And I've laid out these keys to allow for slurs just by using your thumb, and bassonists will have an easy time on this, but for other people, it does take a little bit of time to get used to. But it is possible to play agile things using the extensions. And another thing that's new about this extension that I haven't done on any of the other ones is the inclusion of this alternate left-hand pinky key on the extension. And this key actually has a dual purpose, which I'm super proud of making. This took a lot of tinkering to get it to work properly. And what this key does is it closes 2 of the tone holes. And so what it does is it acts like the low D key on a bass clarinet that you find on many bass clarinets, or if you finger your low E flat and then you add the key, you will get a low D natural. But what it also does is if you finger a low C and you close the key, it closes the low B tone hole. So in essence, you have a key that acts as a low D and a low B natural. So now, instead of only having one fingering for low D natural and low B natural, there are 2. You have 2 alternate fingerings. And this also has the added side effect of finally allowing a low B natural to D slur to happen. And also, to a lesser extent, a B natural to C sharp slur. And I find these keys, they feel very comfortable. And part of the main challenge of building the contralto, Selmer Bundy Contra-alto Clarinet extension was just the ergonomics of the instrument. Because unfortunately, when they designed this instrument, they decided to place the thumb rest stupidly low down. So your thumb is like way down on the instrument, which was really uncomfortable. And trying to put keys somewhere around that just was a nightmare to try and pull off. And so the sort of trade-off is the key work is directly like right below the thumb rest. But you still do have room to put your thumb to rest somewhere, or you can rest it underneath the thumb rest. And you just move your thumb above the keys when necessary. But most of the time, you'll probably just leave your thumbs floating somewhere. And I also did add the option of having a removable thumb rest on the extension itself. So you can actually remove the thumb rest from the instrument, just completely take it off, and this new removable thumb rest that you can actually screw on and off on the extension will be just there in place. So it's in a way more comfortable position. But I decided to leave I decided to leave both thumb rests on because I'm pretty lazy and I didn't want to take it off. Yeah. Another thing about this that's not necessarily part of the extension is you may have noticed there's an extra key here. And if you know clarinets, this key is an alternate A flat E flat key. And it functions as the alternate A flat E flat key. I don't know if it's that easy to see, but it does work. So one of my main goals with making this extension and newer versions of other extensions is that I wanted to make maintaining and adjusting the extensions as easy as possible. So there are many places where you can adjust it yourself on this extension, which include these new types of adjustment screws where you can simply just rotate it and spin it with your hands. No need for a screwdriver, which is pretty awesome. And especially this low D key, low D, B natural key, whatever you want to call it, it's actually I'm pretty proud of myself for this. You can totally just remove it if you feel like it. And on the key itself, there's an option where you can, there's a screw where you can tighten and loosen, and you can actually change the position of the touch piece. So you can move a little more in, you can move it out. And this is helpful because on instruments there are variations, such as the low F C key. And the low F C key might be a little farther out on one instrument, a little further in on another instrument. And it helps so that, because if this key was stationary, it might hit the key and that would be a problem. So you can actually adjust the location of the key, or maybe you can make it a little more comfortable for your hands if your hands are a little smaller or larger. This is a pretty complex mechanism. And well, the key's gone, I'll get it later. And there are some other places for adjustment screws, such as on the levers for the actual extension notes. And probably the area that will need the most adjustment right out of the box is the low E flat key. And that is because on the original instrument, on the original bell, there's a key on the bell, which directly interfaces with the lever that's found on the instrument. And that is a huge point of variation between these instruments, the sort of height of the key and sort of like the thickness of the cork. So there is an adjustment screw on this key, which you can just turn. And this allows you to set the height at which the lever hits the key in order to get all the pads that the low E flat key closes to seal. So as with all of my other extensions, this extension is completely removable and requires no permanent modification to your instrument. And well, actually I guess the only modification that you might want to make is if you do decide to take off the thumb rest to use the thumb rest that I've included on the extension. But that's not really a permanent thing because you can easily just reattach it. And well, that's besides the point. And it is, you do have to get a bit used to the process of assembling and disassembling it, just like when you're assembling a new instrument for the first time. And it does take a bit of practice to get down quickly, but it is fairly straightforward. And I personally like to just assemble it with the top joint off. And some people like to keep their instrument together in one piece, but I personally like to separate it into two pieces. And it is fairly straightforward. The first thing you want to do is you take the part that includes all the keywork, and you want to simply guide it over the thumb rest. And it does help to have the stock thumb rest on because it does help guide it, but it's not really necessary, and you can totally just have the thumb rest off if you wanted to, but it's really helpful to be able to guide the part. And you simply snap it on. It's a friction fit onto the instrument. And now that you have this on, you take the actual extension part itself. And the socket fits onto the tenon cord. So you simply have to line up all the keys, which is, when you're getting started with it, it is a bit of a nightmare since you have to line up, let's say, wow, like 5-6 things. And you sort of just drop it in, swivel it in. And you check the alignment, and that's all good. But now the extension is just loose. So there are actually 2 screws that sort of lock the extension in place that you need to fit in here. I'm not sure if that's very visible, but there are 2 holes for the screws. So you take your screw and simply insert it into the hole. And you take your second screw and insert it into the second hole. And now the extension is nice and secure on the instrument. And you check the extension by checking if all the pads are sealing properly. Because sometimes you do have to rotate the extension a little, such as you rotate the body of the extension, because that is another point of variation where if you misalign the extension, some of the notes, it might take a little more force to get the pads to seal. So you want to try and align it best you can. And I found that the best way to check the alignment on this one in particular is with the low FC key, the pad for it, because there should be a small little gap here next to the extension. And this is usually a good indication that the pads will be fine. But if the gap is a little too large, the keywork, well, it's a little messed up because the gap was too large. And if you push the key way too close to the extension, rotate it. Let me see if I can do that. Yeah, and the key is now stuck closed because it is being blocked by the extension. So you do have to keep in mind that when you're aligning it. So that's about good. And to disassemble it, it is very easy. It's just the same thing backwards. So the first thing you want to do is you take out the screws, which is easier done with 2 hands. You can pop out the screws from the bottom. And this is sort of up to personal preference, but for this one, I do like to take off the key holder first on the contrabass and other things. I like to disassemble the extension part first, but for this one, I found it a little easier to take off this part first. So you simply just take it off, put it somewhere else, and then you wiggle the extension out. And so because the design is in 2 pieces, it is very compact, and you are able to fit it in, you might be able to fit it in your case. And if not, I did find that using like a sort of bag or a tripod bag works pretty well for these extensions. And I will note that one point of variation between your instruments is that the tenon cork thickness might be a little different, such that when it fits into extension, it might be a little loose or it might be a little too tight. And you may want to check the tenon cork thickness and get it recorked if necessary, or sand it down if necessary, because if it's too loose, it might wobble around in the extension, which isn't that great. And if it's too tight, it will be pretty hard to get it in and out of the extension. There is a small adjustment screw on the extension, the socket, which will slightly tighten or loosen the socket, but it's only for like very minor adjustments. And I would recommend recorking or adjusting the cork on the tenon if necessary. And it will also help with using the regular bell. That was really easy to get in. And yeah. So I'm sure that you all are dying to hear how the extension sounds on this contralto clarinet. So I'll play a few things on this, sort of demonstrating how this keywork mechanism works. And I'll also play some excerpts that utilize the extended notes. And I'll also probably play something similar on contrabass clarinet, so you get the idea of the timbre difference between this and the contrabass clarinet. And so this works similarly to other extensions in which you have thumb keys where you have to hold down below E flat. So I'll play a chromatic scale starting on a C down to the extended range. And in that one, I only utilized my right hand thumb, and I didn't utilize this pinky key. And as you can hear, you can definitely slur between these notes by simply just wiggling your thumb around, sort of like how bassonists have to do some thumb magic when they play their instruments because they have like, I don't know, 10 thumb keys, 15, I don't know. And what's nice about this is that you do have this extra alternate key, and this will net you the low D natural and the low B natural. And so I'll demonstrate that. This is a low D natural first with the thumb fingering, and then with your pinky fingering. And you can achieve the same thing with this key on the low B natural too. Now this works is this key, rather than only closing one of the tone holes, it closes both the low D and low B tone holes at the same time, which allows for that, I'm not sure, is it called an articulating mechanism? Something like that. And this also allows for the slur between low B natural and low D to be possible, because when I only had the right hand thumb keys, such as on this contrabass clarinet, there are only the right hand thumb keys and no extra lever for the left hand. It was sort of challenging to do a trill or a slur from low B natural to low D. I mean, well, that's almost like never required anyways, because there's no repertoire written down this low on this instrument, low B natural. Composers get to writing. I already written something. And yeah, so if you just use the thumb keys, you have to sort of jump. Yeah, it's really unclean. But with this key, it is really easy to do, because you literally just hold down this key, and then you can wiggle around to get the low B to D. And what's nice about this is that you also do get the low B natural to low C sharp slur, which is really awesome. So you can play a B major scale, concert D major. And if you notice there, this key really came in useful for that. So yeah, and if the keen-eared among people might hear the intonation and compared to the contrabass. So about the intonation of this, similar to the LeBlanc 352, there is a lot of compromises with the intonation of this, especially because naturally on these instruments they've built the low E natural and the low E flat to be pretty flat, which is the same thing on contrabass also. So on the extension, the compromise is that the low E natural and the low E flat have to lie lower down in pitch compared to the other notes. But the other notes on the extension are fairly in tune on the little bit of flat side. And I've made that decision because on low clarinets, pretty much the lower down you go, also on contrabass, the flatter it gets. So actually playing like a low C, which is the concert E flat, it's probably a little bit flat, and it'll match pretty well if you're sitting in the section with the contrabass clarinets who are playing their low F, which is the notoriously flat note on all clarinets. So having the extended notes a little bit flat actually is beneficial, in my opinion. And this extension, I feel like, doesn't negatively affect the other ranges of the instrument really, and might actually sort of have an improvement, especially because the long clarion B natural, which is often a sort of horrible note that people always complain about, actually I feel like it has a sort of better sound compared to the stock bell on the extension, since the note does vent from this tone hole. And I'll play a chromatic scale starting from a low B natural somewhere into the stratosphere, so you can hear sort of the timbre of the instrument. So I hope you're able to hear the difference in timbre between the extended range of the contralto clarinet versus the equivalent sounding range on contrabass clarinet. And there really is a large difference in timbre basically because these are two completely different instruments and they take completely different setups. And the contralto clarinet has a way smaller bore. Well, at least the Selmer Bundy and I believe the Selmer Rosewood contralto too have a way smaller bore compared to the LeBlanc contrabass clarinets or just contrabass clarinets in general. Because the contrabass clarinets, they're around, I believe, 30 millimeters. And when I built the extension for the LeBlanc 352 straight metal contralto, I also noted that the sort of sound that it gave was very reminiscent and similar to the contrabass clarinet because they have, I think, the same bore size at 30 millimeters, and the Vito contralto, I believe, also has the 30 millimeter bore, which is similar to the Vito contrabass. So those four instruments end up sounding really similar to each other because they all sort of take the large bore size and a large mouthpiece, while this contralto clarinet is sort of unique in its timbre because it actually is in between the bass clarinet and the contrabass clarinet. So it's sort of how I would describe the sound of this, it's sort of intensely reedy, and there's not too much core to it. Well, a lot less core to it compared to on the contrabass, where, well, the contrabass can get really reedy and aggressive too, but there's a lot more sort of boom and core to the sound, a lot more fundamental to the sound on the contrabass clarinet. And a similar comparison I can draw is sort of the low range of a bassoon compared to the low range of a baritone saxophone, which the bassoon is pretty reedy and it's a lot thinner compared to the equivalent range of a baritone saxophone where there's a lot more core to it. And I guess the use cases of this contralto clarinet is, well, it is a completely new sound, so it will be interesting to see what people do with the extended range of this instrument. But I feel like the most practical use of it would be to cover contrabass clarinet parts, which I've noted before that you can pretty much cover most contrabass clarinet repertoire, since you do have the option of down to concert E flat or concert D. But in that case, I would, if possible, I would cover it with the LeBlanc 352, since that has a similar sound to the contrabass clarinet. And I guess this instrument's extended ranges, right now, it's like a novelty, but it's a pretty cool novelty to have. And a lot of people do like the idea of having the instrument go down to a low D, since it's almost kind of weird that alto clarinets and contralto clarinets top out at a low E flat, which is the concert G flat, and it would be so much nicer to just end it on the concert F. So I guess that note's going to get a lot of use. I'm not sure about the other notes. I'm sure people are going to start using these notes a lot, and it'll be pretty awesome to see what comes out of it. Overall, some final remarks about this project. I'm super happy with how this extension turned out, and it took a lot of trial and error, and there were many challenges that I've had to overcome, especially with dealing with all this extra fancy key work and all these new mechanisms, such as this low D and B key, which I'm super proud of actually. The mechanism is pretty cool. And I would definitely like to incorporate these new things onto the other extensions, such as on the LeBlanc 342, which extra low D and B key would be pretty useful, and eventually onto the Vito contrabasses also. And that would really open up a lot of possibilities for these instruments, especially because the extended range is being utilized so much more these days. And I feel like a lot of people will be using the extended range on the contralto clarinet in order to cover contrabass clarinet parts. And there will be a lot of new music being written for the contralto clarinet that utilizes this, so composers get onto it. I've actually written a few things already that include the extended range on the contralto clarinet. So I'm really excited to see what people will do with it. And a lot of this wouldn't be possible without the amount of progress and technology that we've made within the past 2 years, because 3 years ago when I was starting out on contra clarinet, I really wouldn't have dreamed that this would be possible or this would be something that I'm doing. But now that this is possible and this now exists, there's such an infinite amount of possibilities on what can be done, such as the 3D printed octo contra clarinets, and I do want to one day 3D print an entire contralto or contrabass clarinet featuring all these new fancy extended notes, and that would be really awesome to have, and I hope to one day be able to get there. If you would like an extension of your own for your own instrument, please visit my website where I'll post something that has more information about this extension and how you can order one for yourself. And anyways, thank you all so much for watching and supporting me throughout making all these things for low clarinets. And next time when I'm back, I hope I'll have something even cooler to show off. So anyways, thank you all so much for watching and have a great day.